So we will jump back into our first little segment on Tuesday night, our little kind of what in the world segment, some of the stuff that's been going on in the world, a little bit of biblical reflection on these things as a result. It's been since, I think, the 3rd of December since I've done this. So my stack of stuff and the amount of stuff that you guys have been sending me, first of all, it's magnificent. It either brightens me through the day or depresses me even more through the day. There's obviously been a ton of things that have been going on over the last couple of months. First of all, I want to start with a little bit of good news. This was kind of fun to watch. There was a lot going on yesterday, including last night, the college football national championship. If you've been tracking college football at all, it's been an interesting year for college football. But one of the things that's been rising to the surface, and interestingly enough with the two teams, Ohio State and Notre Dame, that were in the final last night, are these coaches and these team members who have just been unabashedly Christians, not even generally Christian, but Jesus Christ-loving Christians all throughout the season. And there have been times where it's been very awkward with some of the commentators and national sports and news networks and so forth. But it's just a little bit like the dam broke open again last night at the end of the game. The guy there on the left, everybody say hi, Sean. There he is. The quarterback for Notre Dame, the losing team. This is part of his presser, part of what he said. I wrote Proverbs 27:17 on my hand. Us and Ohio State were the two teams who praised Jesus Christ the most. And I think we strengthened each other in our faith. I'm happy to see godly men come out on top no matter what the circumstance is. I'm happy to praise Jesus in the lowest of lows. Riley Leonard after the national championship loss versus Ohio State. The ESPN commentators at the end of the game, it's a little video. And this is a Christian professor who happened to notice this. They observed that Christianity's impact on OSU players is that faith fosters selflessness and strengthens their relationships with one another. This aligns perfectly with what the Christian tradition has emphasized for 2,000 years. So here are these two ESPN commentators talking about, well, all these guys are Christians, and they played this really well, and they've got this great attitude, and they've had this kind of testimony and witness. It really might have something to do with their Christian faith. And so these clips have been going around a lot. It's been kind of fun to watch this. We've watched this a couple of times over this past academic calendar year. Some of these football players and basketball players are leading open-air services in the quad and preaching and baptizing. So it's really cool to see stuff like that going on. Something else that happened at the turn of the year in the publishing industry, the Wall Street Journal published that sales of Bibles are booming, fueled by first-time buyers and new versions. Publishers attribute a 22% jump in Bible sales this year to rising anxiety. I don't know why anybody would have a reason to be anxious right now. A search for hope or highly focused marketing and designs. All right, marketing always has its place. But it's been really interesting to watch this little detail make the news. More and more first-time buyers are picking up Bibles, and they're trying to figure out how to read them. It's a fascinating thing to watch because, of course, almost everybody lives all of this out on social media now. So you watch these people, oftentimes they're young people, they bought a Bible for the first time, they're amazed, they don't know what to do with it, they're asking questions. It's really a cool thing. And as a matter of fact, and here we go, our first bingo card, Meg, I lost my connection. Bam! There's an interesting window of opportunity. There's always a way for the church to be a witness, no matter what's going on in culture. That's been part of the theme of our Tuesday nights for several years now. But there's this really interesting window of opportunity. Who knows what's going to happen with it? But the fact that we have these kinds of things happening really lays some things before us. There are a couple of trends that actually a lot of people talk about, both socially, religiously, and politically as well. There's this trend, and it's breaking all of the historical patterns between men and women, especially young men and young women. The historical patterns are exactly the opposite, but this is what's happening now. Young men are trending politically right and toward Christianity. They're much more open to it. They're much more willing to talk about it. They're much more interested in the Christian faith. Young women are trending politically left and toward not atheism, but kind of some form of general spiritualism. We've often on Tuesday nights just called it our American version of paganism. There's something out there, I can be connected to it, whatever that case may be. I'm going to be connected to it, but it's not Christianity. It's not this kind of religion. It's something else. And you can watch those lines diverge like nuts, and it's significant. And it's going to produce some really interesting consequences over the next several years as those things continue to diverge. Churches traditionally are more women, more female than they are male. But these kinds of trends are starting to change inside of churches. So outreach, especially to young men, you've kind of got this wide open window. Traditional atheists are not faring that well in public spaces right now. I cut my teeth in college and seminary and my early years of ministry. The big boogeyman out there was atheism. The new atheists and the skeptics and the free thinkers societies on campuses and so on and so forth. You were ridiculous if you believed that God existed and that Jesus rose from the dead. Atheists are not doing that well right now in the public square. There's still plenty of them out there, but they are losing traction. And they're losing traction to a lot of people, again, specifically males, who have these huge social media footprints, and they have gone from atheist to seeking to either openly Christian or openly seeking the truth of Christianity specifically. Joe Rogan's the most significant example of that, but there are several others, again, with huge platforms. So traditional atheists don't have the kind of hold that they used to have. You've got this opening of seeking for the Christian faith and what it truly means. A lot of former skeptics are either just flat out converting or they're seeking. And something happens with that. That happens with every brand new Christian. And that is you're going to end up with all kinds of spiritual messiness. People with huge platforms get converted, and then a couple of months later they start saying crazy things. Well, it's because they're brand new Christians, right? And of course, now everything happens online with millions of views, so it gets blown up, right? But this is the way the culture, this is a significant trend inside of our culture right now. So as we read in Romans chapter 1 last week, there's absolutely no reason to be ashamed of the gospel or the spiritual power of the gospel. And when I say the spiritual power of the gospel, I don't just mean the power of salvation and life transformation, but I mean the kinds of gifts that are promised inside of the Word of God, the Pentecostal charismatic gifts, as well as praying for healing and things like that. I really do think that there is a significant kind of window open inside of our culture and our world right now for these kinds of things. So there's some good news. There's some stuff to just kind of keep your eyes on, and if you see it, then you kind of recognize, oh, this is part of a larger trend. This is actually becoming a big deal inside of our culture. But then there's some other things that, still aren't all that, happy for everything and everybody right now. The worship of the environment cult continues to do its thing. So this is one tiny little detail. The headline says, Sweden is closing churches to meet climate goals. Technically, it's not Sweden, it's the Church of Sweden that is closing churches to meet climate goals. So they want to be carbon neutral or fossil-free, technically, by the year 2027. So some of their smaller churches in rural areas that have old, antiquated heating systems, they're just shutting them down. They're not going to fill them. They're not going to try to fill them, because what's more important is we have to meet these climate goals instead of try to fill the pews with human beings. We are a part of a tradition, and many of you know this, but our denominational tradition, our kind of stream in evangelicalism is full of young couples who are deeply desirous of finding an empty church somewhere that they can walk into and plant a brand new church. That's our impulse. Well, you've got a small church in a community somewhere where almost nobody is there. Can we send somebody there to pastor it, encourage it, help more people to meet Jesus Christ. Well, if you worship a different God, you make different decisions. We've got a small church with very few people in it, so what we need to do is make sure we meet our climate goals, and we're just going to shut this puppy down, right? So it's not just the nation, it is the denomination itself, the official denomination in Sweden as well. And then this is always a lot of fun, right? These just overwhelming fires. By the way, 3 fires broke out in San Diego in the last 24 or 40 hours. Did you guys know that? So these fires just continue to grow in Southern California. How California eco-bureaucrats halted a Pacific Palisades fire safety project to save an endangered shrub, right? So they were going to build reservoirs, but they couldn't do it because it was going to drown. According to the article, there were a handful of shrubs that they didn't want to kill by building the reservoir. A handful by building the reservoir. So, right, they didn't build the reservoir. When we did the cell phone tower project out front here, okay, this is just a little bit of goofy inside baseball. We did the cell phone tower project here several years ago. We had, who I'm sure is a lovely lady neighbor, walk over here, and she walked into the middle of the construction site and did everything she could to keep those guys from digging their lines for utilities and to build the wall and so on and so forth, because she found a cactus that she liked that was nearby, and it's still out there, but it was nearby, and she was afraid this cactus was going to get killed. So for a couple of days, she actually tried to stall the entire project. She even said, "Can I put some bags around the cactus to make sure you guys don't?" Right? So, I mean, it's one thing to be worried about. It's another thing to walk in the middle of a construction project and say, "You guys have to stop this because this cactus is very special." On the other hand, solar project to destroy thousands of Joshua trees in the Mojave Desert. Right? So which is it? Which is it? We're going to save a couple of shrubs, or are we going to kill a bunch of actually really unique and special trees in the Mojave Desert to build a solar project? And by the way, if you keep your eyes open for the news on these kinds of things, this is what happens to giant solar farms over time. One multi-million-dollar solar farm project in Nebraska is destroyed in one single hailstorm. So, okay, well, which is it, right? Well, which is going to happen here? Something incredible happens to trees and grass when they get destroyed by hail. It's amazing. I don't know how God thought this up, but he did. When they get destroyed by hail, you know what happens? They grow back. I mean, it's stunning. It's stunning what green things do as God designed them to do it. I wanted to make sure you guys were at least aware of this. The state of Colorado is being sued again. The Beckett Fund and the Alliance Defending Freedom are two religious freedom legal foundations. So there is a Catholic-based pregnancy center in the Denver area that is suing the state of Colorado. I don't know if you guys remember in our conversation with Rich Bennett, he mentioned the chemical abortion that is on the rise. Now that's the single greatest cause for abortion right now is the pill. He said there's actually a pill that will reverse that. And what it does is it increases the right kinds of natural hormones, and the body hangs on to the fertilized egg, and you can reverse a chemical abortion. And that happens more often than you might think. Again, you listen to these doctors talk about it and say, well, there's this regret, and she comes in, can I reverse it? As a matter of fact, you can. There's a pill that does that. And in most cases, it will reverse a chemical abortion. This pro-life pregnancy center was offering that advice. The state of Colorado stepped in and said it is illegal for you to even offer the abortion reversal pill to your clients. You cannot tell them it exists. You cannot offer it to them. You cannot tell them who is going to prescribe it. Now, that is a unique level of pro-choice evil. You can't even tell them that a pill that is even often given to women in certain miscarriage situations, it's been used and has been safe for a very long time, and you can't tell them that because we need to make sure that this baby dies. So, the state of Colorado is being sued again because of these kinds of things. The one thing I want to finish with here, one of the executive orders that was signed yesterday defending women from gender ideology, extremism, and restoring biological truth to the federal government is really an interesting executive order. You read through this thing, and these things are written so that they pass legal muster, but then you read through them, and you can tell that somebody who is frustrated wrote it. And I read these things, and I get a kick out of these things. But listen to how the first couple of paragraphs in this go. The purpose of this executive order. Across the country, ideologues who deny the biological reality of sex have increasingly used legal and other socially coercive means to permit men to self-identify as women and gain access to intimate single-sex spaces and activities designed for women, from women's domestic abuse shelters to women's workplace showers. This is wrong. Efforts to eradicate the biological reality of sex fundamentally attack women by depriving them of their dignity, safety, and well-being. The erasure of sex in language and policy has a coercive impact, not just on women, but on the validity of the entire American system. Basing federal policy on truth is critical to scientific inquiry, public safety, morale, and trust in government itself. This unhealthy road is paved by an ongoing and purposeful attack against the ordinary and long-standing use and understanding of biological and scientific terms, replacing the immutable biological reality of sex with an internal, fluid, and subjective sense of self unmoored from biological facts. Invalidating the true and biological category of woman improperly transforms laws and policies designed to protect sex-based opportunities into laws and policies that undermine them, replacing long-standing, cherished legal rights and values with an identity-based, inchoate or incoherent social concept. So this executive order just basically says the federal government's not going to have any part of this anymore. Any document and any office in the federal government that promotes this is now null and void. Websites, entire websites that are devoted to this in the federal government have already started disappearing, right? So this has been taken pretty seriously. A couple of things that are interesting about this particular executive order. A little bit later on, it goes on to define what is a woman. I just love that. Female is defined as, male is defined as, right? So there are probably some people in the Supreme Court who might want to read through this document and, get a little bit of information. But another interesting thing that it does when it defines female is it defines female as a female who is biologically female from conception. It's an interesting thing to say because what it does inside of this document, and I have no clue if this is going to have any kind of ramification, but the document acknowledges fetal personhood. You don't become a woman or a man as soon as you are exited from the womb, but from conception, you're male and female. This kind of stuff, as the executive order puts it, it's not just some legalese or a few people in some high schools who have complained. It actually affects some very fundamental things about reality and about how society works. And that's because the movement to erase the notion of men and women and sex and to go to performance-based gender concept is a direct line of attack on the very foundation of how God created us. It's a direct attack on Genesis 1, 2, and 3. So I think it was Orwell who said something like this. This is a paraphrase. When falsehood reigns, the job of the courageous is to speak what is true. You read through that document or those couple of paragraphs and stuff like it, and you think, well, this is literally biology 101, but now it has to be said. Now it has to be defended. And there just is no denying that, things have been going on the last several decades. God-denying, nature-worshiping, culturally Marxist woke policies just simply got us to the point where we have to legally say, this is what a female is, this is what a man is, it's sex, it's not gender, right? Because an entire ideology has gotten to us to the point where we have to talk about this. And it is a direct attack on Genesis 1 through 3. Creating God's image. So it's interesting that this entire ideology is rooted in denying the very first fact of our creation. Created in the image of God, male and female, he created them. So we're going to deny that. And we're going to enshrine the rebellion. So it's a complete upending of the biblical narrative from Genesis 1 to Genesis 3. This is how you were created. This is why you leave mother and father and you cleave to your spouse and you become a family unit. And the rebellion is what breaks all of that. This ideology turns the whole thing around. It denies the male and female, the importance of the family, and it enshrines the rebellion, right? So this is theological at its core. It's sociological at its core. It is deeply psychological at its core. It's not about feelings in the end. It's about actually denying biological and theological realities. Now, we're going to talk about this a little bit on Sunday mornings over the next couple of weeks with the rest of Romans chapter 1. But I put this here because Tuesday night, you're special people. Don't tell the others I said that, but you are. Beware of the Overton window. How many of you heard the phrase Overton window? So it's named after a guy who was a sociologist of all things. His last name was Overton. I can't remember his first name, but now you can remember his. You know his first name? I thought I heard. Okay, yeah, thought I heard it. Sorry. But his theory was this: the Overton window is the set of ideas and policies, or the ideas and practices that are acceptable inside of a culture. And over time, the Overton window moves. And so that set of acceptable ideas and activities, what was the case at one point in time changes. And so now in this period of time, all of this stuff is no longer acceptable socially. It's no longer politically correct. This is what's politically correct now. And here's how the Overton window tends to move. People push it. They push it and they push it. And what they do is they will propose or push something that's just outside of the Overton window. You give it a few years and maybe even a generation of people. You look back and you discover what's happened is that 10 years ago, this was ridiculous. Nobody believed that. Nobody thought that was true. But now you've discovered that Overton window has moved. And now this is just perfectly normal. In fact, you're kind of weird if you don't believe that this is true. So it is very much a culturally relative sense of what is right and what is wrong. When you watch the tracking, the research and the polling of what people who self-identify as Catholic or evangelical Christians believe, many of them have just moved with the Overton window. So many of us would say that trans ideology, the medical mutilation, the hormonal mutilation, that's way too far. We're never going to go for that. We're going to vote against it. We're going to stand up against it. We're going to talk against it. But same-sex marriage is probably fine. This is how it works, right? The homosexual inclination lifestyle, as long as it doesn't hurt anybody else, is probably fine. Where 10 years ago, it wasn't that, right? But now a sizable number of evangelical Christians have given up on some fundamental truths because the cultural norm has changed. Right? So we have to keep our eyes open for this and how this works. So even as one is widely rejected, a bunch of these other things that a while ago were out of that window, out of the realm of acceptability, have become perfectly acceptable now. So we have to keep our eyes on these things, which is why the Word of God is so incredibly important. Reading it, understanding it, and then making sense of it. Not just it says it, I believe it, that settles it, but it says it, and here's why it says it. Here's why this is so good and right for everyone, that these things are true. Such an incredible thing.